So to recap, step one is identify what it is that you have and if you want to use this throughout the winter. Step two is figure out if you live somewhere where it's going to freeze or you have the potential of losing power. If that's the case, you definitely want to winterize and store your chiller and all of your components inside somewhere nice and warm and nice and safe, preventing your chiller from getting damaged. Step three, if you do decide to winterize, you're going to want to drain your entire tub, drain your chiller, drain everything out. And then you're going to want to figure out step four if you want to use this as a traditional ice bath throughout the winter. If that's the case, figure out where you want it, find your plug your tub up, fill it up with water, and enjoy the fruits of your labor and using a traditional ice bath throughout the winter. What's up, guys? Dave Moss Jr. here, and I want to make a quick video helping so many people out there. I live in Florida. It is going to be 86 degrees today, and I know a lot of people live where it's snowing right now, and you have cold plunges like this. And I'm getting a lot of questions about how to winterize a cold plunge. So, no experience, but from what I've learned from my friends who have had cold plunges in winter areas is you don't want to have your chiller outside on if there's any risk of potential freeze, because it's metal pipes inside there, and when water freezes and then expands and contracts, it could bust your chiller, and you don't want that to happen. So, seems simple enough, but here's the steps to winterizing your cold plunge if you have a continuous cold plunge like this that has an external chiller and no heater. Step one is going to identify what you have. You know, this is the Grizzly 450 that Desert Plunge uses. There's galvanized horse troughs. There's the inflatables, ice barrels, plunge. There's so many different varieties of cold plunge. So you got to figure out what it is that you have. And before you do anything, make sure that you have a plug that will fit into whatever hole your cold plunge has currently to obviously block and plug the water. Because when you winterize this, you're going to actually remove all your filters, your chillers, your pumps, all of that. You're going to actually take that and store it inside throughout the winter and then use whatever the tub is, if you want to, as an actual traditional ice bath. So you're going to just fill it up with water, no filtration, no circulation, and then you're going to either chip away at that ice or use a de-icer, or even get one of those little horse trough defrosters. Really cool idea. A lot of people don't really think about that, but you can buy them for like 50 bucks on Amazon. Plugs right into an outlet. It's just a little metal thing. You put it in the water, keeps that water from freezing over. If you have horses, that's what people will use those for. Before you start doing any of this stuff, just make sure you have a plug that will fit in to all the holes. So like on the Grizzly 450 here, Desert Plunge sends plugs that will plug right into here and right here at the bottom, and that will allow you to use this cooler without your chiller and without your pumps and stuff like that. So the first thing is make sure that you have a way to plug your tub. And just to give you an idea of some of like what the plugs would look like. So this is a plug that would go onto like a Desert Plunge or a Grizzly inside a 3/4 inch threaded connection. So you can use this. They also sometimes will just include the original plug, depending on which Grizzly cooler you're using. If you're using an ice barrel, kind of the same thing, there will be a plug that goes into the tip here, and then you should have a spigot at the bottom of a lot of them. And then on like a horse trough, I'm trying to show them all. This didn't come with a plug. I ordered this. This was a 3/4 inch just cap that I put right on there to plug this up. So you might have to order a plug depending on if you did a DIY or what it is that you're using. And then kind of the same thing, you can order a cap or a plug to go in the back of almost any one of these inflatables if it didn't already come with one, or if you lost it. A lot of people, like, this comes in the bag of random things if you bought a cold plunge and you might have just lost it. Plunge does the same thing. If you ordered one of their newer plunges, they all have like a cap that will go on the back, the connection, so you can just use ice. And then if you did a DIY, you know, they're all a little different. So it just depends on what you actually did. And that's why the first step is to identify what it is you have and how you're going to remove your chiller. Next thing is going to be just completely taking this whole thing apart. So you're going to unplug it, you're going to drain it. Now, if you have the Desert Plunge like this, a couple different ways, because there's no real easy way to drain it if you have it inside. The way I would do it is I would just turn it off, flip this little switch right here. This is going to prevent the water from coming out the filter and into this tube right here. And then I would unscrew this, take this off the back here, and then I would just take this, I mean, it's roughly, you got roughly like 7 feet, 8 feet of hose, and just take this tip Go put it in a sink or go put it somewhere where you don't mind that there's going to be water. And then what's cool is you could actually turn it on and the actual pump itself will force the water out and you'll drain it really fast. So you're going to want to drain the tub, or if it's outside and you want to just kind of go for it, you can unscrew this and then just try to put the plug in while the water's coming out and do the same thing at the bottom. But I'd recommend just go ahead and draining it and removing everything. Next, you're going to want to remove the chiller, remove the components out of the back. Now, if you have the Desert Plunge, you're going to have the boxes on the back, which is totally fine. That's going to be totally fine. But take all the other stuff. Basically, like when you put this thing together, you're going to take all the things that you attached and plugged in, you're going to unplug them, detach them, and go store them inside somewhere nice and safe for the winter. Then figure out where you want this thing, move it where you want to, make sure you put your plugs in, and then fill it back up with water. And then you're good to go. I mean, theoretically, you're good to go. Once again, I live in Florida where I need a chiller 24/7, 365 days a year to keep my water nice and cold. But for those of you who live in the winter areas, this is just a quick tutorial on how theoretically you would winterize your cold plunge if you have an external chiller. So hopefully this was helpful. If there's any questions, if there's something I didn't even think about, this is just conversations I've had with people who live in the cold, freezing areas of the country and of the world. But if there's something I didn't think about or didn't share on this video, pop it down in the comments below. Let's help each other out. If there's a question in the comments below that you know the answer to, answer those questions. Let's make this a good resource for people who are trying to figure out how to do this. And if you have a cold plunge like an ice barrel and you're using their chiller, same thing. You're just going to plug it up and remove the chiller. You don't want to leave the chiller outside, even if you don't plan on starting it up. You just don't want water to freeze inside the pipes. It could cause damage, and we definitely don't want that. These things aren't cheap. So just make sure that you are removing your chiller if you're not going to have it on and running, and just put it inside. If you do live somewhere where it just gets cold and you are like, hey, it gets into like the 30s and 40s, but it never really freezes, and you're not worried about your power shutting off for weeks at a time, that's the biggest concern. Is like if you have water flowing through the chiller, through the pump, through the pipes 24/7 and you don't turn it off, you should be totally fine, because water moving, it's very difficult for it to freeze. It has to be like really, really cold. But if there is a chance that you're going to run out of power, or your power is going to get tripped for a long period of time, or you're going to enter into the negative temperature, like definitely just go ahead and winterize your cold plunge. Remove your chiller, remove those components, put them in a nice safe warm spot inside. You can drain them too. The cool thing about these chillers, if you have an active aqua chiller or something like that, is you can tilt it on its side, let all the water come out of it and drain it. It's not going to hurt it. Put it back up on its, put it back up right side when you're storing it, and you'll be good to go. I've done a lot with these active aqua chillers, and I haven't been able to kill one yet. So to recap, step 1 is identify what it is that you have, and if you want to use this throughout the winter. Step 2 is figure out if you live somewhere where it's going to freeze or you have the potential of losing power. If that's the case, you definitely want to winterize and store your chiller and all of your components inside somewhere nice and warm and nice and safe, preventing your chiller from getting damaged. Step 3, if you do decide to winterize, you're going to want to drain your entire tub, drain your chiller, drain everything out, and then you're going to want to figure out step 4 if you want to use this as a traditional ice bath throughout the winter. If that's the case, figure out where you want it, find your plug your tub up, fill it up with water, and enjoy the fruits of your labor and using a traditional ice bath throughout the winter. If you do decide you just want to store the entire thing inside, well, that's simple. Drain the entire thing and store the entire thing inside somewhere. But the cool thing is almost every one of these tubs, including the inflatables, last and work well, even in the really cold winter months, from what I've heard and seen from so many other people. And then a frequently asked question on, should I keep my pump moving water? Like if I'm not super concerned about everything freezing over and the pump and everything's kind of like PVC, plastic, whatever, should I keep the pump on so it can keep filtering the water? That's something that I used to think would be a good idea, but there's a lot of people out there that don't live where it's freezing, but it does get cold, and they're like, hey, like my water's actually heating up. Well, kind of silly for us to not think about this, but the pump is constantly moving and creating heat. So yeah, it will over time create heat and heat the water up. So just keep that in mind if you do decide you want to just remove your chiller and keep everything else kind of flowing, keep the water moving through the filter. It's a really cool idea in theory, but unless you live somewhere where it's like really cold and you're going to be adding ice a lot or whatever, that pump might create a little bit too much heat to where your water might heat up too much. And then if you're going to use one of those little horse water defrosters on Amazon, just remember, like, I'd put that in like maybe overnight and then like remove it. I don't know, I'd probably put it in for like a couple hours if it's gonna freeze. If you have a grizzly or something heavily insulated, I don't think you even need that, because these do a really good job of maintaining inside temperature. So I mean, it could theoretically freeze over depending on where you live, but just kind of play it by ear. This is for you. Experiment with it. There is no right or wrong, because every space is different. Every plunge is different. The environment where we all live is totally different. So you got to just experiment and explore. And that's the fun thing about all this. Once again, I hope this video was helpful. Short, not very edited, just kind of a tutorial on how to winterize your cold plunge if you have an external chiller. If this video is helpful, you know, like it, subscribe, all that fun YouTube stuff. And then, like I said earlier, ask questions in the comments or answer questions in the comments if there's any that you can answer. Love you guys. Appreciate you. Hope you have a great day. I'll see you on the next video, and God bless.